Let's speak now to Dr. Jackie Cilliers, who's the head of African Futures and Innovation at the Institute for Security Studies. Dr. Cilliers, thank you so much for your time this evening. The report says Cabinet must take responsibility for failing to contain the violence that we saw in July. I wonder what is your reaction to this recommendation?
Good evening. Yes, well, I think it's entirely appropriate. The President and Cabinet reflect the executive who managed South Africa. And what the report does, it shows a lack of, accountability, but that's widespread in South Africa. But it shows a shambolic system where all the individual components are in place, but they are not interacting with one another. So you have a National Security Council and various ministers who are all available and do their thing, but they are not talking to one another. They don't share information or intelligence, and certainly they do not coordinate. And the responsibility for that obviously lies with the President and with Cabinet.
And it is that very operating in silos that the report also lays bare that led to the different government leaders speaking in different voices. And as it says, it led to a poorly coordinated response. And also looking at how, even when you read the report, how it's characterized, some say that it was security concerns, a complex issue, failed insurrection, criminal elements. It did not help the situation on the ground.
No, and the introduction to the report, and I'll read it, the question the report says is not if and whether more unrest and violence will occur, but when it will occur. We all know this is a very difficult year for South Africa, because the other point that is quite central to the analysis is that factionalism within the ruling party, within the ANC, has now spilt out and threatens South Africa. And that factionalism is not going to go away before December of this year, when we find new elections and possibly the emergence of a more united top six and National Executive Council within the governing party. So those challenges, I think, present South Africa with concern, given the incoherence that we see within the security system.
And talking about, what you've just said, when we find ourselves in such a vulnerable situation, I wonder how the response is going to be, because the report also paints a picture of an overwhelmed police service, saying that they were overwhelmed by the number of looters, and saying that it's going to be important for public order police to be trained effectively in managing large crowds. Is this a possibility at all, looking at the current state of the SABC?
Not without bringing stability to the top management of SAPS, including making a decision on the future of the National Commissioner. We have had many reports on the state of policing in South Africa, the Farnham Commission, and so on and so forth. The problem is that it's not really structure. It is competent management that reflects the main problem. The appointment of capable, competent, senior policemen or women to permanent position in the top echelon of the police. We've been talking about this for a number of years. The National Planning Commission in 2012 recommended the appointment of a committee that appoints, for example, the National Police Commissioner. Well, we're now in 2022. So another report is not going to do much. We'll have the President saying he accepts, Cabinet accepts collective responsibility for this, but where is the action that will in actual fact make sure that the concern of the report, that we are going to see ongoing violence and instability, that we are going to have police, public order policing, amongst others, intelligence, and a military that are trained and equipped to do their job.
And one of the things that, does not surprise one is the talk about significant intelligence failure in that particular report. It's nothing new. We saw the same thing in the Marikana Commission as well, talking about how intelligence failed when it comes to that particular massacre. At the same time, we saw a high-level review panel report into the state of, the security agency, talking about the politicization of that very department. We saw it laid bare again in the State Capture Commission. I wonder what will it take to ensure that the intelligence department really needs to do what it's supposed to.
Yes, this of course is not only linked to the security agencies, it is across government. Lack of coordination amongst economic policies, disagreement in cabinet ministers attacking and disagreeing with the president. But the root cause of this, we should not step away from. It is the factionalism within the ruling party. It is the efforts that the president has to do to manage this ongoing factionalism, which seems to drain all energy from the governing party and from government. So, and the report makes that point. This lack of coordination of capacity is largely a reflection of the turbulence and the disunity within the ANC.
And talking about, these divisions, because as you say, the report does, paint them for us. But I wonder, because the president is saying that he's going to be using the State of the Nation address to outline the first actions that government will take in response to some of these findings as well as recommendations. Given some of the divisions that the report also talks about, are you expecting any harsh action against some members of the cabinet?
I do hope that we will see action. There are challenges within cabinet very clearly, but it also lies with the president. We know the challenges that that lie between the Minister of Police and the National Commissioner. Many of these problems are really quite easy to resolve. They relate to the appointment of capable policemen and women to the top echelons in permanent capacity and insulating the police from political interference, particularly from the cadre deployment from whichever faction within the ANC. So these are not high-profile announcements. These are things that the minister and the state and the president can do very easily. It just takes some focus and action. And then there's the issue of coordination within the security systems, which seems to be sorely lacking. I mean, the impression one gets from the report is just an absolute lack of coordination, a lack of detail, a lack of attention, a serious attention to the coordination systems. And the irony is this is something that South Africa, in a sense, used to excel at. Think of what happened with the Soccer World Cup that we had in South Africa. We managed it, and we managed it professionally. We can turn these things around. It takes decisive action and leadership. So we'll hear many more promises, but will we see these practical recommendations and actions being taken?
All right, Dr. Silius, it's really going to be interesting to see how this report is dealt with, as you say, because there's many facets of it that really talks about what action is required and should we find ourselves in this situation again. But of course, we look to later on this week to see what the president says is going to be some of the initial responses then for government at this stage. That was Dr. Jackie Silius, head of African Futures and Innovation at the Institute for Security Studies.